Okay, hi guys. So we're in the middle of a massive epidemic of diabetics, pre-diabetics, and pre-diabetics. Um, and if you go to the doctors, there's very little discussion about cause, and all the treatment is aimed at suppressing symptoms. And while they are quite effective at getting blood sugars down, the actual underlying cause is never dealt with, and the consequence of that is that gradually people get worse and worse typically, and the prognosis is not good, the life is shortened, and the quality of life is also very much lower. And there's a lot of problems such as blindness, heart attacks, strokes, amputations, neurological damage, etc., all linked to the high blood sugars, which are just a symptom of something else. So when we look at something holistically, um, then we're always looking to fix the actual cause of the problem, which is really, the only way to get a cure as such. So I'm going to be talking about some things that you can do that, if you do, will lower your blood sugars. No question about it. You can get your blood sugars into the normal range quite quickly once you understand and start to treat cause. Now, I'm going to be talking about things that you can do with your diet, things that you can do with your lifestyle, and then supplements. I'm not going to go too much into supplements because of the legalities of talking about supplements and treating natural things. So that's something that you can connect with me directly, and I'll help you with that separate to this video. We'll see how much I cover, but I don't think I'm going to go too much into that. But the foundation is diet. The problem with diet is that requires discipline. So supplements is the easier route, and a lot of people just do supplements. It's not what I would recommend. I really believe that diet is really, really important for this particular issue. It's important in general, but in this particular issue, it's particularly important. So it should be in combination. The diet, a few other lifestyle choices that you can make, and supplements. And in fact, with diabetes, supplements are very important because, due to the nature of the problem, diabetics are always deficient in certain things. For example, they're always deficient in thiamine B1, um, magnesium, copper, potassium, chromium, vanadium. It's a fairly big list of things that diabetics are always deficient in. And so they are very important, but I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I'm going to be more talking about diet today, and also on certain lifestyle choices that you can make. But the beginning is going to be about the cause. So many people are aware that when we talk about diet for diabetes, that there are people who claim big success with different types of diet. One of the diets that's often used is a plant-based diet. Um, and a lot of people using plant-based diets have good success getting their sugars down. And conversely, and interestingly, the second popular diet is a meat-based diet. So people that eat just meat, fats, cheese, eggs, they also get their blood sugars down. And it seems a little weird that you can go either direction. But what's even more weird is if you take both those groups of food and eat them together, it doesn't work. And that begins to point us and give us the hint of the actual cause. And I'm going to keep this simple. It is scientifically quite complex, but there is something that's fairly well understood now that's called the Randall cycle. Okay, you can look this up if you have the desire to. It's Randall, Randle cycle, Randall cycle. Randall is the name of the guy, Philip Randall, who first discovered this, what I'm about to tell you. And basically it's this, that when you eat carbs with fat, they each block each other from getting into the cells. So the fatty acids block the carbs or the sugars from getting into the cells, and the sugars block the fatty acids from getting in the cells. So what happens is the sugars and the fatty acids go into the blood, and typically the fats will go into storage. Maybe the sugars will, or alternatively, and usually as well, what happens is the body will produce extra insulin, more insulin, to try and drive that sugar into the cells where it wanted it in the first place, because both fats, by the way, and sugars are used for fuel. Okay, so they're oxidized to make energy, both of them, and they compete with each other. So when you're eating that combination, you end up with pushing them both into the blood, which includes the sugars. So you produce insulin to push it back into the cells. Okay, so the problem with that is when you're making extra insulin, more than you would normally need, after a while you become a little bit insulin resistant. Okay, so then you need a bit more insulin to do the same job. So over years, your insulin is going up and up and up. Now, should you get tested for blood sugars, you'd be fine because you're getting the sugars into the cells. It's just you're requiring extra insulin to do it. So what happens is it can be 10 or 15 years where your body is handling that by gradually increasing the insulin, and your sugars are fine. And as I say, if you're tested, you're going to be fine. One of the side effects, though, as your insulin goes up, is you're going to, very many people, not everybody, but a lot of people start to put weight on, especially around the middle. Okay, that's a side effect of higher insulin. So many people who don't change their eating find that they were, slim, and now they're not changing their eating habits and they're starting to put the weight on. That's often because their insulin is much higher. Now, what they should do, but the doctors don't do this or they don't tell you this, instead of going and getting your sugars tested, it'd be much better to go and get your insulin tested, because you're going to see that you're on the path to diabetes 10, 15 or more years ahead of time before you actually have a problem with your sugars. Once you start to have a problem with your sugars, they call you pre-diabetic. So I'm calling this pre-diabetic. So if you have your insulin tested and it's high, you're on that path, much easier to deal with at that point. So first thing is, it's a good idea to get your insulin tested, rather than your blood sugars. Obviously, if you have your blood sugars tested and that's high, then you're already there. So because the blood sugar test is accurate, it's just something that's going to detect problems far too late in the game for my liking. I much prefer to know earlier. Makes sense, right? So insulin test is a very handy thing to do if you suspect that maybe you might have insulin problems, and your insulin is going up. And one of the clues to that possibly is that you're putting weight on that you didn't used to put on for the same kind of diet, or sometimes even you're eating less and you're putting weight on. Okay, so the problem then that leads to that is this combination of eating fats with carbs. And many of the foods that we love, that's what they are. The food industry has learned that if you combine fats with carbs, it's very tasty, it's very addictive, and it also, we can eat a lot more of it because it has the ability to switch off the switch that tells us we're full. So you can eat much more fats and carbs than you can either carbs on their own or proteins with fats. You can eat much more. In fact, you can eat a meal where you're stuffed, but then somebody offers you something that's fats and carbs, say ice cream or donuts, suddenly you've got room for that. That's part of the thing. So one of the problems of the combination of fats and carbs is not just its blocking ability, but also we can eat a lot more of it. And that also plays into the problem, as we're overeating, which gives our body more to do and has to deal. It just makes it more difficult for the body in general, and that becomes more difficult for the sugars as well. Okay, so our body handles one type of food much better than combination. So this whole balanced diet idea actually works against us, because your body prefers single types of fuel rather than combinations at the same time. So therefore, the best diet to eat if you have a problem handling carbs is either to eat carbs without the fat or fats without the carbs, to go one of those two routes. Now, my preference is the fats without the carbs, for various reasons. But if you're a vegan, vegetarian, that's going to be difficult. So you can go the plant-based route. Personally, I don't believe it's as healthy. I believe you run into nutritional problems and so on, but it will help you bring your sugars down. So, but I'm going to talk more about fats and proteins. So if you eat, for example, what's called a hypercarnivore diet, which is very low carbs, it's basically meat, steak, and chicken, and all the meats, any of the meats that you would want, plus butter, cheese, eggs. If you just eat that, your blood sugars will go into the normal range. And then depending, you might reverse your diabetes, or even if you don't, your blood sugars will be normal, so you will stop all of the escalating health challenges normally associated with diabetes. You won't, even though you technically would be diabetic, you won't have any of the problems, because all the problems come about as a result of the high blood sugars, which you won't have. Now that's a tough diet to do, but if you can do that, that's what will happen. Now, the second part to the diet, or to our diet, is not just what we eat, but when we eat it. So it's much healthier, and again, specifically for diabetics, but in general, what I'm saying is going to be healthy for everybody. It should none of us should be mixing the carbs and the fats. Nobody should be doing that. That's what leads to problems. We can get away with a bit of that if we're not diabetic, but as we're going to diabetes, then we can't get away with it anymore, because we've already done it for a long time and it's damaged us. Okay, so then when we eat is important. The best way of eating for a diabetic, and it's a very good thing to do for anybody, is to do what we call intermittent fasting. That is to say that we move towards trying to eat all of our food in an 8-hour window. So 4 hours before we go to bed, we've stopped eating. Okay, so we finish our last meal and then it's 4 hours before we go to bed. So we're not going to bed with a full stomach. That's really important for diabetics, very healthy for anybody. Then we sleep 8 hours or thereabouts, depending on what it is you sleep. But if it's 8 hours, when you get up, you don't eat for 4 hours. And then you have your first meal, and you now have 8 hours to eat all your food, which ideally is going to be without mixing carbs and fat. But even if you're eating bad, it's still going to be helpful to do it in an 8-hour window and give your body a rest the other 16 hours. Okay, so even if you don't change your diet, this is going to be helpful. This on its own can make a huge difference to your blood sugars and your health in general. Okay, now if you can't do 8 hours, you might have to build to it. So start off, you don't eat for 2 hours before you go to bed, and then 2 hours when you get up, and work up to it. If you've got an indisciplined diet, you can't always jump straight to it. You have to build towards these things. But as you get there, you're going to notice more and more impact on your health. Okay, so you want to go for intermittent fasting. Now, if you've got the discipline to do full fasts, like day, 2-day, 3-day fast, where you're just drinking water, that is another massive help. It's a very, very healthy thing to do. So you can include that as well if you've got that discipline. Sometimes people don't have that discipline, but once they've done intermittent fasting for a while, it changes their relationship to food. They start having control, which they didn't have before, and then they can move to that. Okay, so diet, that's obviously very quick, very rough, but that's what you're aiming at for anybody, ideally. But if you're diabetic, this is really, really important. Now, obviously, we're all human, we fail. Some of us are less disciplined than others, but at least we need to have the goal of what we should be doing so we can start to move in the right direction and start to help ourselves. Okay, so that's where you need to be aiming with the intermittent fasting, regular fasting, not mixing carbs and fats, and keeping your meals. You want not to overeat, which is much easier when you're not mixing carbs and fats. When you're eating carbs and fats, and a lot of unhealthy foods, things like donuts, Pringles, ice cream, chocolate, all these things, the food industry has learnt that by mixing carbs and fats, we're going to be very addicted, and we can eat masses of it. We can eat a whole tube of Pringles, which is, I don't know, 3,000 calories or whatever it is, massive amounts of calories, and somehow we can manage it and not even be that full. It's this carbs fat combination that does that and switches off our ability to know. So we're going to stop, and we're going to focus on one group or the other. Now, if you're doing the meat and fat and you have to have carbs, then maybe get up in the morning, you've got an empty stomach now, and just have a carb meal, no fats. So if you do have to have carbs, have them, but don't have them with fats. Okay. Hopefully that all makes sense. Okay, a couple of other lifestyle choices. So first of all, exercise. Now, if you're too bad with diabetes, you're not going to have the energy to exercise. But as you start eating correctly, the energy will start to come. Exercise burns energy. Energy is made by sugars and fats. So you will burn those things, and that will help to bring your sugars down. Doing like anything cardio, anything that raises your pulse, gets your heart going. So that's all going to help as long as you have the energy. I understand if you're further along the path with diabetes, you might not even have the energy to run in your head. I know, but when you get to that point, you can start including cardio. Okay, so exercise is very, very helpful. Another thing that's helpful is grounding. Okay, so grounding is the idea of getting your feet on the ground outside. If you happen, like me, to live near the beach, you can go and stand in the ocean. That's the perfect way to ground. But it releases electrically, it rebalances you, and that has a very powerful anti-inflammatory role. It's free, which is fantastic. And one of the big problems of diabetes, and in fact, most people are struggling with inflammation for a variety of reasons. We're all being poisoned. So inflammation is a big problem. It's underlying all chronic disease. So we really want to get our inflammation down, and that's a beautiful way of contributing to that goal and helping you to bring down your inflammation. So that's the basics of diet and lifestyle. The sunshine as well is really good. So if you can ground in the sun, if you're lucky enough to be somewhere where you get sunshine, that's also very, very helpful. If you can't get outside, there are grounding mats that you can get. So I highly recommend that you do that. You get a grounding mat and sleep on it, or maybe if you're like me at a computer all day, you can have a mat that you put your bare feet on that's plugged in and earthed. So that's something else that you can look into for grounding if you happen to live somewhere where it's cold for 5 or 6 months of the year and you can't really get out and ground. Okay, so that is a very quick overview. I'm covered as much ground as possible, but I'm going to just now touch on supplements. So there are certain herbs, for example, that are very effective in increasing insulin sensitivity, in helping to fight inflammation and so on. I'm not going to talk about them on this video for reasons I've already mentioned, but it's very important that these are applied as well, even if you're doing the diet stuff. So for those, let's have a private chat. Also, it depends on where you are on your journey. So different things are needed at different stages. So if you're early, you're pre-diabetic, or you're newly diabetic, that's going to be in a different place to if you're further along the road and you're suffering with some of the symptoms like neuropathy. You need different things. So I will just mention one vitamin, because it breaks all the normal rules that I normally apply, because normally I will never recommend a synthetic, but this is a situation where I will recommend a synthetic. Because it's synthetic, I can more get away with saying it. So thiamine B1, all diabetics are deficient in, because they flush it horribly, massive amounts of it they flush. In percentage terms, so it becomes impossible to get enough thiamine from your food. Can't be done, just can't, because you're flushing so much now. Type 1 diabetics eat significantly even more than type 2, but both flush massive amounts of thiamine. Thiamine is one of the vitamins that helps protect you from the damage that would be done by diabetes, and then you don't have it if you're diabetic. Okay, so you need high dose synthetic thiamine. It's one of the supplements that's very helpful for diabetics, especially once they start to suffer symptoms. Not such a deal, but still helpful for earlier pre-diabetics and so on. So you're going to need food state, apart from that one, you're going to need food state natural minerals and vitamins, broad spectrum. There's things that I recommend for that. There's certain herbs that, as I say, are very, very helpful. But again, that's something you want to connect to me. Let me know what your current situation is, where you are on the path, and I will help you with that. So hopefully this has given you just a good overview. And as I say, connect with me, and I will go into that side of things specifically for your situation. God bless you. Have a great day. Thank you very much. Bye bye.